Hello, welcome to the world of webinars. I'm Sharon Andrews. I'm an area SENCO working for Worcestershire Children First in the early years inclusion team. Welcome. An introduction to the Preschool Forum, information for early years practitioners and parents. A little housekeeping. This webinar has been pre-recorded. If there are any aspects that haven't been covered, please contact the early years inclusion team. And we are hoping to compile any outstanding questions or aspects onto a frequently asked questions sheet, which will be available to download from the Early Years Inclusion website. Further webinars will take place after this one. The aims of today's webinar are to consider the Preschool Forum role and process, to introduce the graduated response, to detail the different levels of support on entry into school, and to look at the paperwork and evidence required to support that school entry. The role of the Preschool Forum is to primarily coordinate involvement. That's from professionals, agencies, parents and carers. To identify children who may require some close monitoring due to their additional needs. To clarify the nature of their needs using a multidisciplinary approach, although this is not the forum whereby diagnosis will take place. It's also to identify and plan provision and support for that child, both within the early years and for them moving into school, and to ensure that move into school takes place smoothly. It's also to identify the minority of children who have severe and complex needs that may warrant an enhanced SEN support or EHCP moving into school. So when the child has or may have significant special educational needs is when a referral is deemed appropriate. Once in setting, this would generally be those children presenting at GR3, Graduated Response 3, or Graduated Response 4 in funding terms, or the exceptional early years funding. Generally, children at GR2, Graduated Response 2, should only be referred where there's evidence that an additional specialist intervention is required, for example, a space at the early years language class. The child should also be referred if their needs are deemed that they require more than normal entitlement within the early years setting or in school. So children referred may potentially require a space at a specialist nursery assessment class. So for example, in the south of the county, Fort Royal, or in the north of the county, Bachelor Nursery Plus. It may be that they require a space at a specialist language class in their preschool year. These are dotted around the county and generally have early years language class within their title. Or it may be that they require enhanced SEN support or an EHC moving into school. So who can refer to the Preschool Forum? Well, that's health and social care professionals, so generally a paediatrician or speech and language therapists are the main referrers. Other members of the Preschool Forum, for example, the education members who are involved, such as the hearing impaired team, they can refer. And now early years settings can refer if the above are not involved or haven't had recent inputs. Excuse the light, it's just gone off. I think we'll be okay to carry on. So the full procedure for referrals from early years settings can be obtained by contacting the early years inclusion team. Preschool forum meetings are held on a monthly basis, except July and August, the summer holidays. And there are 4 meetings around the county. So for those children residing in Redditch and Bromsgrove, or Wye Forest, or Worcester City, Malvern and Droitwich grouped together, or Wychavon. Now, up to 100 children can be discussed at any meeting. So you can imagine the time is quite tight and the discussions may be very, very brief. So it could just, be a couple of minutes. And I think this is one of the main reasons why parents or settings can't be allowed. It just wouldn't be feasible. The Preschool Forum monitors the progress of children and makes appropriate and timely referrals to health and education agencies so that the child's holistic development can be supported. The Preschool Forum process, well, basically children are first raised as an early alert and then reviewed regularly. Generally every 3 to 6 months, but it may be more if the child is very young, or it may be that enough information hasn't been gained, so they are reviewed in the next month. When they're first discussed and when specifically requested by forum members, a Q5 form will be sent to early year settings to gather information about the child, so this can be then relayed back to the preschool forum. If involved, the inclusion team or other professionals will provide information from the settings and parents. When a child is known to Preschool Forum, settings must be following the graduated response cycle of assess, plan, do, review. For more information about this, please follow the link on the slide. So newly referred children will be discussed as an early alert, whatever their age, and then they'll be reviewed regularly according to the need. The Preschool Forum will identify and refer children who may require more specialist input, for example, from the Early Years Inclusion SENCO Support Advisor, SSA, or PD Outreach, the Physical Difficulties, Disabilities Outreach Team, or the Hearing and Visual Impairment teams. The forum liaises with all involved professionals, generally through one representative of the team who attends the meetings. And as the academic year progresses, the forum considers if a child may require a more specialist placement for their preschool year. Within their preschool year, the forum reviews and monitors those children and takes into account any views, feedback from parents and professionals, and referrals are made to appropriate professionals, for example, the area SENCO team. Levels of support that may be required moving into school are considered within this year. So where children have additional needs, the level of support identified by the forum, as suggested in the graduated response, will be one of the 3 areas below. Either the child will enter with SEN support, or they will enter with enhanced SEN support, or with an education, health and care plan, which is for only those very few across the county. Involved professionals will support transition into school, and this will be agreed at the Preschool Forum, who's going to support this transition. So we've talked about the graduated response in early years, and this will be evidenced by paperwork such as an individual provision map, support plan, records of interventions to show that interventions have taken place and what the outcome has been. These IPMs or support plans will be reviewed on a regular basis. We recommend 6 to 8 weeks. Early support tracking sheets need to be in place. The Preschool Forum acknowledge early support. These are smaller steps than identified in the EYFS development matters and outside agency reports. There is a graduated response webinar, and there is also individual provision map training if further information and advice is required. So parents are obviously vital in this process. As I said earlier, they can't attend the meetings. However, those members can feed in information, or the settings feed in information by completing the Q5. At the end of the meeting, discussion about that child, a professional will then be identified to feed back to parents the outcome of the discussion. This either takes the form of the health feeding directly back to parents, an educational professional such as VIHI feeding back to parents, or where the area SENCO or SENCO Support advisor are involved, they will feed back to the setting, and it's the setting's responsibility to then feed back to the parents. Very occasionally, the inclusion team may actually feed back directly to parents, but the settings will be alerted of this. As a safety net, if feedback hasn't been received after 2 weeks of the known meeting, then please contact the inclusion team who will help you with the feedback information. So we said there were 3 prongs of entry into support. SEN Support is the first level of that, and schools have within their notional budget funds to accommodate supporting children with additional needs, and they have to by law remove barriers to learning. So we'll put in place educational provision such as small group interventions, targeted learning, and implementation of resources and strategies relevant to the child's needs. They will continue with the graduated response 4-pronged cycle of assess, plan, do, review, and will continue to involve parents and carers and the voice of the child. Now, the second prong of support was enhanced SEN support. The authority recognises that a small number of children will present with a high level of need that warrants additional support, and therefore a top-up of funding to the notional allocation will be provided. This is referred to as enhanced SEN support. Enhanced SEN support comprises of 3 elements for the receiving school. A profile of strengths and difficulties, which is prepared by a specialist teacher prior to school entry, so generally takes place in the summer term. Support from that specialist teacher or another named professional for transition into school, and the opportunity for the school to apply for additional top-up funding over and above that of the notional funding. A request for enhanced support must be made via the Preschool Forum. Any member of the forum can refer in and will need to complete a request for strengths and needs form. This details the child's needs, their early support levels, activities required on school entry that are above that which is normally available at SEN Support. The report will then be completed by either a member of the learning support team or the complex communication needs team, depending on the child's primary area of need. They will then make the final recommendation as to whether the needs can be met at SEN Support or whether the school can apply for enhanced funding. The Preschool Forum will only consider those children for formal assessment where the child is likely to require or would benefit from specialist provision in their reception year. That is a special school placement or a placement in an autism base. Now, if the forum decide that an education, health and care plan is required and a special school placement should be allocated, it's still down to parents' choice as to whether they want their child to attend a mainstream setting. Also, on rare occasions, special school places are not available even where a child has an education, health and care plan and the parent wants special school placement. So this needs to be discussed with the case officer allocated to that child when an EHC is being considered. The child needs to meet one of the 4 areas as outlined in the Code of Practice. That's cognition and learning, physical and sensory, communication and interaction, or social, emotional, or mental health. And the major aspect is that the graduated response has been implemented, and unfortunately, there has been minimal progress. In case a child is submitted for an EHCP or enhanced funding, settings need to ensure that the paperwork trail is in place. So there will need to be 6 months of the graduated response cycle, at least 2 completed individual provision maps, with 1 being a current one. They all need to be dated, signed by parents and include outside agency targets. Early support tracking and overviews need to be in place, and health reports and observations linked to the targets. The All About Me and child's views need to be included, as does the evidence of spend or the inclusion supplement. The family conversation record will capture the parents' views. Settings may need to support with that, and that will be sent by the Preschool Forum with the paperwork for EHCP to be completed. Now, progress, as we've mentioned earlier, is vital for an EHCP to take place. The SEN Code of Practice highlights that where an EHC is being considered, the setting must have taken relevant and purposeful action to identify, assess and meet the special educational needs of that child, and that no progress, limited progress has been made. Worcester County Council's criteria for education, health and care needs assessment in the early years is that the child's development levels are at either 0 to 11 or 8 to 20 months of age. Now here we are looking at an example of a request made a couple of years ago for a child in the early years, and the evidence from the setting showed these levels of development. So as you can see, the child started at 0 to 11 months secure on their development levels, and by the end of that year they were presenting at 16 to 26 months, which is obviously lower than the 30 to 50 months that would be expected. However, progress was seen, and the panel rejected this application because they felt the child's needs would be able to be met from school's budget. Parents were not happy about this, and neither were the settings. So this was appealed against, and the child was investigated further, and support was given to the setting to have a look at development and progress. And as you can see on the next slide, on closer inspection, the actual early support stages of development showed a disparity from previously, and it was discovered that in the areas shown, PSED, CNL and thinking, that actually no secure level was present. Some aspects in the higher levels were seen, but none of those either were secure. So this child would be described as presenting at 0 to 11 months. So the paperwork was resubmitted, and actually, fortunately for this child, an education, health and care plan was awarded, and this child is now in a special school, which was the appropriate provision. So I think we just need to carefully consider that evidence if a child is going to be forwarded for an education and healthcare needs assessment. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the webinar. If you require any further information about anything that I've talked about today, please have a look at the link on the page or contact either the Early Years Inclusion team on the helpline number or SEN Services on the number in the slide. Okay, and it's goodbye from me.